Have you ever stared at a spreadsheet just packed with numbers and seen, well, just a bunch of noise? What if I told you that hidden inside all that data is a story, a really compelling one, just waiting for someone to tell it? Today, we're going to learn how to do just that. We're going to become data storytellers.
So, this is the big question, right? How do we cut through all that clutter and find what's really going on? To figure that out, let's start with a little mystery.
All right, take a look at this. We've got satisfaction scores from two different groups who went to the exact same restaurant. Now, just by glancing at it, you'd probably think group 2 had a way better time, wouldn't you? But what if the data is hiding the real story? To find it, we need to build our toolkit.
Okay, so our very first tool is all about finding the main character of our data story. We're looking for that one single number that can kind of represent the whole group, the hero of the story. Statisticians have a fancy name for this. They call it central tendency.
First up is the mean. This is the one we all learned in school as the average. It's super simple. You just add up all the scores and then you divide by how many scores there are. It's usually the first thing people check to get a quick feel for the data.
But what if you have some really wild scores in there? A couple of extreme numbers that could throw everything off. That's where the median is your best friend. All you do is line up your numbers from smallest to largest and pick the one that's smack dab in the middle. It gives you the true halfway point, and it doesn't care about those weird outliers.
And rounding out our first set of tools, we have the mode. The mode is just the number that shows up the most often. That's it. And what's really cool about the mode is you can use it for stuff that isn't even numbers, like, say, the most popular pizza topping in a survey. A dataset can even have more than one mode, which is pretty neat.
So here's the deal, and this is super important. You have to pick the right tool for the job. Imagine one person gave the restaurant a score of 100, but everyone else gave it a 2. The mean would be pulled way up, making it look like people liked it more than they actually did. The median, on the other hand, it just ignores that one crazy score. It tells you a much more honest story about the typical experience.
Okay, so we've got our tools for finding the center. We can find the mean, the median, and the mode, but is that really enough to solve our restaurant mystery? Does knowing the average score really tell us the whole story about who was happier? I think you know where this is going. The answer is a definite no.
And here is the big twist. Check this out. It turns out both groups had the exact same mean satisfaction score, a 6 out of 10. How crazy is that? Their average experience was identical, but you can see with your own eyes that their charts look totally different. So, finding the center is clearly not the whole story. To really crack this case, we need to add another tool to our belt. See, it's not enough to know the main character of the story. We also need to know if the plot is consistent or if it's all over the place. We need to measure the data's spread. You might also hear this called dispersion.
Dispersion sounds kind of technical, but it's a really simple idea. It just asks, are all the scores huddled up together, or are they scattered far and wide? It's basically a measure of consistency. If the dispersion is small, it means everyone had a pretty similar experience. If it's large, well, things were a lot more unpredictable.
Now, the most powerful tool we have for measuring this spread is called standard deviation. It sounds a little intimidating, I know, but the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward. It just boils everything down to a single standard number that tells us, on average, how far each person's score was from the group's average.
Now, don't worry, we're not going to get lost in the math here. The formula isn't the point, it's the logic that matters. The process basically finds the average, then it measures how far away every single score is from that average, and then it finds a special kind of average of all those distances. It's just a really logical way to capture the idea of consistency in one number.
And this right here is what solves our restaurant mystery. Group 1 had a small standard deviation. See how their scores are all clustered together? They had a consistently meh experience. But Group 2, they had a huge standard deviation. Their scores were all over the map. A few people absolutely loved it, and a few people absolutely hated it. Their experience was completely inconsistent. That is the real story the numbers were trying to tell us.
All right, it's time for our final tool. So far, we've been telling a story with just one set of data at a time. But, some of the most interesting stories come from seeing how two different things are connected. Like, does hotter weather actually cause more ice cream sales? To figure that stuff out, we need to understand relationships in our data.
And the word for that is correlation. We're basically looking for patterns between two different things. We want to know if one thing changes, does another thing tend to change with it in a predictable way? It's all about finding the hidden connections in the world.
So there are three basic types of correlation you'll run into. Positive correlation is when one thing goes up, the other tends to go up too. Negative is the opposite. One goes up, the other goes down. And sometimes, you know what? There's just no relationship at all. And we can see these patterns almost instantly using a simple chart called a scatter plot.
Here's a classic example for you. If we were to plot a bunch of people's height on one axis and their weight on the other, we'd almost certainly see this kind of upward trend. Taller people tend to weigh more. As height increases, weight tends to increase. That's a positive correlation. You can see how the dots form a pretty clear upward sloping line.
But not all relationships are created equal. If the dots on our chart form a really tight, almost perfect line, we call that a strong correlation. The connection is super predictable. But if the dots are more scattered, but you can still kind of see a general trend, well, that's a weak correlation. The relationship is there, it's just a bit looser.
So there we have it. We've gathered our tools. We've learned how to find the story's main character, how to measure the plot's consistency, and how to spot relationships with other stories. Let's wrap this up and see what it all means.
The way to think about this is that you now have this basic but incredibly powerful three-part toolkit. Seriously, with just these three ideas, you can start to make sense of almost any data you come across. You can find the center, measure the spread, and uncover the relationships.
And this really is the most important thing to remember. The point of all this isn't to just crunch numbers for the sake of it. It's about communication. It's about being a translator, taking a messy, complicated set of data and turning it into a simple, clear, and honest story that people can actually understand.
So, I'll just leave you with this one question. Think about it. From the stats on your fitness tracker, to your monthly budget, to the news headlines you see every single day, data is literally everywhere. So, now that you have the tools to listen, what stories are you going to discover?